Good morning, everyone. Thank you for registering for our webinar and joining us for our session today. I hope all of you are doing well and keeping safe. So today's session is going to be, as you can understand from the title, it's about how to manage or how to deter cyber threats by having a proper access management and a review approach. So we'll be seeing some of the best practices that you can follow when it comes to access management and reviewing process, and how you can ensure fully fledged identity and access management and cyber security across an infrastructure that is evolving or growing. So that is what we're going to explore in today's session. Right. So this is the agenda. We're going to be covering few topics, starting from onboarding, defining privileges for users who are with respect to their department or a role, in case of any privilege creep, how do you tackle that? And even when users are being deprovisioned, how would you manage that with having a proper automated deprovisioning system which will purge off all the privileges, and also to ensure that in case of any undesired changes, how would you revoke those changes and bring the system back to its original state or its ideal state. Now, one of the most overlooked access management best practices or cyber security best practice is centralization. So imagine your network as it exists currently. Consider all of the users, the applications, your databases, data traffic flows, your portals, and all of that that comprise it. Now imagine trying to keep an eye on all of these moving parts simultaneously, all the while acknowledging the inevitability of scaling and considering their security of the identities as well. Now, unfortunately, legacy identity management solutions can't possibly provide the centralized view that is necessary to keep all of this information straight. So your enterprise, or you will have to need to consider deploying a solution which will centralize your view, your controls and authority over users' identities. Otherwise, you'll always find yourself in the back foot. Now, the session is going to go like this. We're going to start off with some of the best practices that you can follow when it comes to granting access rights or managing or revoking access rights. And I will be giving some examples or best practices on how you can go about it. At the end of the session, I'll just give a very brief demo of one of the products from our Manage Engine suite, which is going to help you achieve that. So that will be at the end of the session. And if you have any questions during the session, you can definitely reach out to me. You can make use of the questions pane, and I will answer all of your questions individually. And yeah, so that's how the flow of the session is going to be. So let's start off with the first one, which is onboarding, right? Now, the part of the key to key management best practice is starting on the right foot. So if your enterprise struggles with ensuring employees begin their roles with the right permissions, then you will have a hard time solidifying business processes and ensuring cybersecurity. Right? So instead, your employees and you, the IT team, must spend valuable time and resource ironing out the necessary permissions and ensuring that they work properly before, or everything is in place before the employee truly starts working. So with an identity and access management solution, you can automate the onboarding process. Unfortunately, the native tools do not come equipped with a simple or an efficient or GUI, which is going to help you with the onboarding process. So this having an IAM solution which is going to automate the onboarding process will ensure that the employees start off on the right foot with the right permissions. So this takes the burden of you to onboard each employee. Maybe you might be having employees joining in batches of hundreds. So in case if you want to address all of them one by one, if you're going to be using native tools like PowerShell scripts to go ahead and do that, it might not be easy. You would have to be extremely good at scripting. You would have to troubleshoot the errors, and more than anything, it's going to take a lot of time. So it's going to shorten the onboarding process if you're going to automate it from a matter of months to a matter of hours. Plus, automated onboarding forces your IT team to determine the necessary permissions for each role, thereby heightening your identity governance capabilities. So I've just listed or given a normal scenario of how an onboarding happens in an organization. Now, for example, the HR team is giving you or sharing an Excel sheet or an Excel file with the list of new users joining the organization, right? So the HR team is sending them to you. You as an IT administrator have some time or less time to provision those accounts in all of those platforms apart from Active Directory. So he would be getting the data from a people or a human resource management software, an HRMS or an HRIS, whatever that you might be using in your organization. So he'll export that data and he would be sending that file to you, and you would be tasked with creating accounts for all of those users within a short space of time, right? And not just creating accounts, you would also have to manage their permissions, their group memberships, their NTFS and share permissions, and so on. It's not an easy task. It's not something that you can do in a matter of minutes. Now imagine if you're automating this whole process, right? So rather than you depending on the HR team to send the CSV file to you or send the Excel file to you, and then you take those details one by one and create accounts or use PowerShell scripts to create accounts for those users. Instead, can you remove that dependency on this process where you'll have to wait for an HR to send the details, or rather integrate your Active Directory management solution, your IAM solution with your HR solution? So if that's the case, what you can do is, or what the tool will do is, it will automatically fetch the new users that are being added to your HRMS application. And the tool will immediately detect the new users and provision accounts in all of those platforms like Active Directory or Office 365, managing the licenses, Exchange mailbox, and so on, in a matter of seconds. So that's how simple and easy it's going to be. If you're going to take the matters into your own hands, then automating or integrating this process of HRMS integration and your Active Directory solution is going to make this all the more easy, and it's going to save you a lot of time. It's going to save errors because you're going to let a tool take care of it. And even if you want to have some involvement in this process, there are ways in which you can make sure that this process or this action goes through a workflow or a review mechanism to check if all the details, if everything is in place, if all the privileges are given exactly how it should be given. There are no excessive privileges. The privileges are not incomplete, and then you can go ahead and give an approval for this automation. So I will show you how that is possible using one of the tools at the end of the session. But for now, just want to talk about, to consider that rather than relying on manual methods to go about with an important process such as onboarding, making sure that you get it right the first time so that, there are no more complications when an employee or a bunch of employees start working. So this is one way to go about it. Now that we're talking about automation, we also have to talk about role-based access policy, right? So among access management best practices listed in today's session, role-based access control will appear the most complicated, but when broken down to layman's terms, it actually proves to be incredibly simple. So role-based access policy, or RBAC, means restricting your permissions, the user's permissions, with respect to their designation, their department, the team that they belong to. That is, they will have permissions only what they require and nothing more or nothing less. Now, for example, marketing users do not need access to financial information. Similarly, your accounting team member does not require access to your digital financial accounts information. So all of that will have to be thought out in place, or you have to establish a framework where you sort of define or identify what all privileges this particular user will need. Say a user belonging to marketing is joining the organization, joining a particular team. He would need access to resources that are relevant to his function, his designation, his team, and so on. So if you have a template or a checklist or a framework in place which is going to define all those privileges that are to be given to that particular user or a set of users joining a particular function, then it's absolutely no, you would not have to worry about you giving privileges to users that are not necessary. And in case if you do not give the right privileges, you will not have to again address a help desk request, which is going to be sent your way again, requesting for privileges for that particular domain or for that particular file server containing some important information which is relevant to him, right? So ideally, so this includes your privileged users as well as your regular users. Moreover, no role should receive permissions outside their roles. If projects demand certain access rights or privileges, what you can consider is you can consider giving temporary privileges. That is, your privileges you're giving to that user can have a time limit. So you can have an expiry period, right? So for example, a certain users who are going to be helping you with managing the compliance audits require access to some financial data, some audit related information, which has to be given to those users for a certain period of time, and then it has to be revoked. Now imagine you are giving those privileges, but sometimes due to the lack of time, due to too many tasks coming your way, you might forget to revoke those privileges, revoke those permissions, and then that user or that team will have access to all those important financial data, important company sensitive information, and later they could access them for malicious reasons, or someone could access their account unauthorized access, and then those accounts could be an entry point to gain access to your sensitive information. So we don't want that. So the best solution is to give temporary permissions to those users, and that also can be automated. I'll be showing you in the second half of the session how that's done. Right, privilege free. So like what I was saying in the beginning, when users are being onboarded, ideally they should have a standard set of permissions that are to be given. If you are a large organization with your company spread across geographical regions, different teams, different locations, you will have different IT teams to help you with that. So administrator A may follow a certain way to go about doing it. Administrator B might have a different set of processes to go about granting privileges. If you have a uniform process, a uniform way to go about it, which is followed across the organization, this will make sure that even when you're granting privileges, there is no mismatch, there are no abuse of privileges, and so on. Now, starting off, everyone might have the same set of privileges that they are supposed to have, but over the course of time, because of their responsibilities, their projects that they might be assigned to, their new requirements with respect to the roles, they might require permissions to certain resources that were not granted to them initially, right? So when you're giving privileges to them, you'll have to also keep in mind that these privileges have to be periodically reviewed. Does user A require this after a certain period of time? Does user A or B require this amount of group memberships? Should he be a part of these groups now that the project is being completed, it's terminated? So ideally, what should happen is you should have a periodic check of permissions that is there, or that every set of users have over a period of time. So rather than waiting for the end of the year when the compliance audits are, due, and you scramble to get or check what is the status of my organization, what is the status of the privileges these users have, what are the groups they are part of, what are the changes that is being carried out. Rather than that, it's always a good practice to sort of have a periodic or a review of these privileges and access rights to make sure that they are there, that nothing is out of place, and all of these actions and all of these modifications are documented over a period of time, right? So privilege creep tends to happen over the course of time, and unfortunately it is up to you to tackle all of that or identify that to make sure that these accounts that have privileges over privileges are not again used to, or not used by attackers to gain entry into your organization's network, right? For example, privileged users, you might be having access to a lot of information, but over a period of time it might not be necessary. They might have to be revoked, certain access rights have to be revoked, and so on. But if you have a process in which you are reviewing these accounts over a course of time, and this will ensure that these privileges are not abused at a later point in time. So that's one way to ensure that even though users might start off with the right set of access rights, over a period of time it could not be the same, and these needs to be addressed ASAP. Now, reverse undesired permission changes. For example, you might have carried out certain action, given certain privileges to users. It might be by accident. You might have done it without understanding the context. What can you do if something like that happens, right? You need to quickly address that. You need to quickly revoke those permissions. So there's one way to go about it. For example, if you're going to have or maintain a backup of all the changes that is happening within your network. So what you can do is you can keep track of all the changes that has been happening. A tool which is going to make sure or validate or record every single change, as small as changing an object attribute value, as something small as changing their description, their contact attributes, to something as group memberships, their permissions, their logon restrictions, and so on. Having a proper record or having a proper data which will which is accumulated over a period of time, which will validate or which will have the changes of every change, however small it is, in your network, is one best way to keep track or identify what went wrong or where it went wrong, and how you can restore things back to its normal. Now, if you're going to be having something like a backup and a recovery solution which is going to help you with this, it's going to be very easy for you. In fact, if you have to try out, if you want to identify certain privileges that a user had over the last few weeks, that there have been a lot of modifications that have been done, and you want to keep track of that, or you want to identify what all changes that has been carried out over a period of time, then these backups are going to help you. So you can identify what all changes that happen over the course of time, what kind of changes, what is the current value, what was the previous value, what were the values in between, what were the attributes that were changed, everything. If you're going to do that, and you can simply restore to any backup version that you want to. For example, if I find the first backup that was done, or the first change that was done to that particular user object is right, then you can simply restore to that particular version. If you feel that version number 3 or version number 6 or version number 10 is the right one, then you can simply restore to that particular version. Now, IAM means you're managing your access, you're managing your user activities, and somehow it does not fall into the scope of IAM, that having a backup and a recovery solution should also be considered should also be included to come to a full circle, because we're talking about managing your or onboarding users, we're talking about reprovisioning those users, we're talking about deprovisioning, but we're not talking about in case there is any change, how do you revert, how do you restore, how do you get things back to its ideal state. So having a backup and a recovery software is going to help you in the long run as well. And something which is very important and something which we have overlooked because of lack of time, or we just couldn't get to it, or it's just too much of a task that we simply do not want to just go there, because we are really worried that you might see things that shouldn't be there. The accounts that are really ancient, archaic, are still there with all those privileges intact, and that's something that's we are worried to tackle. Failing to offboard your employees creates new identity management nightmares in the long term. Without deprovisioning and removing accounts as employees leave the enterprise, these accounts can linger unseen on the network, right? So they become orphaned accounts, which can go ignored for years until some hacker or threat attack group use them to bypass your digital perimeter. So many enterprises do not have an identity and access management solutions which can detect and remove orphaned accounts. In fact, many do not possess the willpower or the time to actually seek out all the orphaned accounts lurking in your environment, right? Unused groups, inactive users, licenses that are not assigned to active users. Instead, they are still associated to inactive accounts, disabled accounts, empty OUs. All of this have to be taken care of, right? So therefore, your enterprise needs to seek out an IAM solution which will discover and remove orphaned accounts in your network to achieve the highest possible level of cybersecurity visibility. And if that's the top priority for your business. So additionally, your solution, the solution that you're opting for, should also automate, right? So simply manually going about and checking these, or searching for these accounts simply is not time efficient. You might not be able to, get to those accounts. Having an automated way of mandating the deprovisioning or offboarding process to ensure that no orphan accounts slip past your identity security. So the best way to solve an orphan account problem is straightforward prevention. So simply identifying all those accounts that have expired over a period of time, that are not not used, the groups that are not used with all those privileges intact. Privileged user accounts with all their access rights still there could be a potential entry point for unauthorized users to gain access to your network, right? So that's one way to tackle this solution, is by doing an automated deprovisioning, which will simply check all those boxes when employees leave the organization, right? So now that I've covered some best practices, I would like to introduce you to the tool. So I'm not sure if you're already using the tool, if you're familiar with the tool that I'm going to be talking about is AD Manager Plus. Some of you might be evaluating the tool, some of you might already be customers of AD Manager Plus, but hopefully with this session, you would be able to gain some extra insights about the tool. If you haven't tried these, you can definitely try it out in today's session. So with AD Manager Plus, I would like to talk about very in brief what the tool is all about. It's a unified management solution, reporting solution for your AD, or for your exchange, for your Sky for Business, and so on, right? And when you are creating users, or when you're creating groups, or when you're creating computers, you might have those users or those attributes which all have a certain standard values, right? So employees joining the HR, employees joining the finance, employees joining the HR team, marketing team will have very common relevant attributes which are specific to their job or a function. So if you want to sort of establish that uniformity like I said, when you are a large organization spread across different regions, then having a checklist or a framework is going to help. And AD Manager Plus gives you the option of having a template. A template is nothing but a skeleton on which you can build on. You can have templates for users belonging to marketing department, to finance department, to sales department, and so on. So you can create any number of templates that you want, and every time a user is joining the organization, you can simply invoke those templates, and then all those common attributes, relevant attributes to that particular function will get auto-populated. And even when you're onboarding, you can simply integrate AD Manager Plus with some of the HRMS tools. As of now, the tools that we support are UltiPro. If you're using UltiPro in your organization, you can integrate that with AD Manager Plus. If you're using Workday, you can integrate that. Zoho People, which is our in-house HRMS solution, you can integrate that as well. And apart from that, if your HRMS application that you might be using in your organization has MS SQL or Oracle as its database, then you can simply integrate those databases as well, so that the tool will be able to detect and fetch new users that are being added to the application or the database. And then those users can be automatically onboarded here using the tool. And deprovisioning, we have ways in which you can completely customize your deprovisioning. Each organization will have different ways to go about deprovisioning accounts. You will have maybe first you would move them to a different OU. First you would like remove all their privileges. Then you would then you would disable those accounts. Then maybe after a period of time you would delete those accounts. You might have different ways to go about it, right? So each organization will have their deprovisioning policy of your own, and we have the flexibility of creating or customizing your own deprovisioning policy. You simply have to point and click which action you want to appear, when you want to appear, after how many days, how many hours you want it to happen, and you can customize your own deprovisioning policy. Every time you are making a change within your network, you also want to make sure that it goes through a validation process where every access right that is granted to the user, every access right that is modified for a user, and every permissions that is revoked for a user goes through a workflow mechanism, then it's possible to do that as well. We have a workflow which is also customizable, will allow you to define logic where, for example, if it's a user provisioning, then what is the process? Who has to validate the process? If it's a user password reset, who has to overlook the process? Who has to approve it before it's being carried out by the IT administration? So we have a workflow for that. And even when you're giving privileges to non-IT users to carry out certain actions, you also want to make sure that those users have very specific access rights, very specific boundaries to which, on which how many actions they can perform. Then we have very granular way of delegating access rights to non-IT users. And the topic that I spoke about at the end, which is reversing undesired permission changes. So Active Directory AD Manager Plus it offers an AD backup and a recovery solution as a part of as an add-on to the tool. So the tool can simply, record full backups and incremental backups of all the information that is being carried out, that is happening within your network. And you can simply restore very granularly to maybe even attribute level, version level. You can simply pick and choose which state or which version of backup you want to restore to, and that is possible with the add-on that we support. So that brings us to the end of today's session. So I wanted the session to be very brief. I want to talk about some fine points when it comes to access management reviews. We've covered that. Yes, and another topic that I wanted to mention is we have temporary assignment of permissions. Even when you are when a user is being added to a certain group, he can be automatically added to a group and revoke the particular group membership after a period of time. So that is another way to ensure that the users do not have unnecessary privileges, and you as IT administrators do not have to go and check every access that has been given, and whether it's revoked, should it still be given, what is the time period of this particular permission that this user should have, and so on. So that takes a whole lot, that makes it a whole lot easy for you as IT administrators when it comes to managing your environment, your users, your resources, your requests, help desk requests, and so on. So, right. So this was a little bit of a brief explanation of what AD Manager Plus can do. It also has a lot many other capabilities, but I didn't want to talk about all of that, just the points that are specific to today's session. But then if you have any questions with respect to the tool or today's sessions, you can definitely reach out to me using the Q&A panel right there. And before we end the session, we have come to our end of the session. But before we end the session, I have two things to share with you. In fact, two polls. So the first poll is going to be about the tool that we discussed. So this is just to understand or get an awareness if you're familiar with AD Manager Plus, because that is the tool which allows you to carry out all these actions, the best practices that I mentioned in today's session. That's going to be the first poll. And second poll is going to be a live feedback. So I will be launching the first poll right now. So right, so you'll be able to see that on your screen. So first one is, how do you know a Manage Engine AD Manager Plus? I'm an existing customer of AD Manager Plus, or I'm currently evaluating AD Manager Plus. So I'll keep this poll for a few seconds, maybe another 15 seconds. So it'd be great if you can answer that. I'm just going to keep this poll on for a few more seconds before I end the poll and then launch the second one. Great, thank you so much for this. So could end the poll. And I will be launching the second one, which is a survey of the session. So I'll be launching that right now. I'll be able to see the survey live, the poll. So it would be great if you can give your feedback right away. Going to keep the screen on for another 10-15 seconds more. Great. So thank you so much for giving your feedback. Much appreciated. And I'll be ending the poll right now. Thank you. Right. So that brings us to end of today's session. So if you have any questions, I'll be available online. You can definitely reach out to me using the questions pane. And if you have any questions, and if you want to get in touch with our support team as well, this is the email address. You can simply email them. You can also go to our website and initiate a live chat with the team as well. Right. So thank you so much. And I hope to see you all in another session. Thank you. Have a great day.